Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be diving into something that's not exactly a school subject, but is probably one of the most important skills you'll ever need for studying and life in general, which is how to actually sit down and just get work done. Now, this is a challenge that so many students face, myself included. Over the years, I've seen it in my friends, my clients, and even my own bad habits. It's that feeling where you know exactly what you need to do, but for some reason, you just can't start. Whether it's procrastination, distractions, or just feeling overwhelmed, this can hold you back from achieving your goals. But the good news is, this is a skill that you can learn. I've spent time researching strategies, experimenting on myself, and diving into the scientific literature to figure out what works and what doesn't. In this lesson, I'm going to share practical tips that have helped me and helped others overcome this obstacle so you can finally stop overthinking and start studying. Let's get into it. And really quickly, a little bit about me. My name is Danuga Manage, and I'm a maths and science tutor for kindergarten through to year 11. So if you're in that age range, and you want to get some help from me personally, I'll put my contact information in the video's description. So it's going to be down below. Check it out, and we can get in touch and we can discuss something. So let's get into it. So the first thing to understand is some days are harder than others, right? So we all have like sessions planned out for, for example, I would say at 3 o'clock today, I'm going to start working. And maybe today I will, or maybe I won't. Some days I will, and it's productive. But some days I'll say not 3:30, and then 4:30. It goes on, and the work never gets done. So what we can tell from that is it's not possible, or we can't say that we're lazy and it's not possible to do work because we know we can. On some days it's easy and it's possible and we do it, but other days it doesn't happen. So we chalk it up to like being tired or being stressed, but really there is some scientific things that we can actually understand that are going to help us achieve further in our goals. So some things that may impact if you work or not could be some days, some times of days. For example, for me, I know in the mornings I'm way more productive than in the evenings. And that's why I do my hardest work in the morning, and then I save my more menial things to the evening. And also things like having deadlines. So for example, I had some English stuff coming up or like obviously a long time ago, that I was like a couple days overdue, and those 2 days of like losing 5% every single day, that deadline made me work much harder than if I didn't have that deadline and I would just kind of like slag around. And also probably like one of the more important things is how much you enjoy the work. So an example could be, last year we did a subject called kinematics in physics, and I love this subject. So I could just spend a long time working and I could get started easily. But then something like doing Lewis structures in chemistry, I don't really love doing that. So it was much harder for me to get into that. But to be honest, no one really knows why. Some days we can't and some days we can. And because of that, we just end up missing more and more sessions than we should have. And by researching, I've actually discovered something called the dopamine ladder. And this is a principle that helps me explain why some days I get the work done and why some days don't work. And this principle, the ladder, makes so much sense. So I'm going to explain to you exactly what it is. And I'm going to share some short-term strategies to how to use this principle to your advantage. Let's get into it. Alright, so I'm going to start by talking about something called the dopamine transition principle. So what I mean by this is every activity and the circumstances surrounding it has a correlated dopamine level. So think of the most fun thing you can do. For example, I don't do this much, but let me think of something. I know, we'll go with a simple example. Scrolling on Reels, right? So scrolling on Reels, this is, as we know, a super high dopamine producing activity. This just pumps dopamine like anything, right? And some other things like studying, which are not as fun, and as a result, or the reason we don't find it as fun is because it doesn't pump as much dopamine. So something I've realized is that if we're doing something and you want to switch tasks, we don't want to switch tasks that down switch, which means we don't want to be doing something with high dopamine and then come down to a low dopamine task. It's much easier to start low dopamine and go higher. Our brain is always looking to go higher on the ladder but not come back down. And sometimes we can down switch, so we can be scrolling reels and then immediately hop into doing work. It's possible, but it's more harder than if you were like reading a book and then you go into work, which is probably a bit higher for me, to be honest. So something I've realized is there's always a limit to how much we can down switch. So if we're up here like on the moon, it's super hard to then drop 10 rungs and do some super low dopamine activity, right? For example, person A scrolls social media for 45 minutes on a person B, and person A reads for 45 minutes. Who starts studying more easily, and why? What I think is because the person who was reading, their dopamine was here, so coming down studying is a small jump. But Instagram, up here, coming down to studying, that's a big jump, and as a result, it's much harder to get into this. And something I've noticed is if we're having a drop in dopamine, that's too steep. So if we're up here and we come all the way down with the super steep jump in dopamine, it's impossible to have good quality work. So we can sit down and write bullshit for about 30 minutes before our brain gets distracted again, but it's going to be low quality and not meaningful, right? So this is the basic rule of the dopamine transition principle. Alright, so this is why we obey the principle from before, and we can't beat your biology. No one can beat their biology. What the dopamine craving system in our brain does is actually makes us safer. Our dopamine system guides us towards safety, right? Because I'll give you an example. If you're watching this video, you're likely human, and humans come from like cavemen, right? So think of an example like this. We have two cavemen, right? Two cavemen. Caveman A, he sees a bush full of berries, and he goes and eats the berries for the whole day. No productiveness, just eating berries and relaxing in the sun. Now caveman B, he sees a big cave, like a black bear's cave, and he wants to go explore it and conquer it and kill the bear, right? Even though this killing the bear is, I guess if you extrapolate to our world, going out there and doing a hard task is better. Back then, the caveman just got killed by the bear. So then, who stayed alive longer to pass down their genetics? The guy eating berries. So as a result, the DNA in all of you, including me, loves dopamine, loves short-term gratification, and it's super hard to do low dopamine stuff because historically in caveman times, a low dopamine activity could mean death, right? Your brain associates working with death. Think about that. If you're going to blame yourself for not working, at least know that your brain literally thinks you'll die doing work. No wonder it's hard to get work done, right? Because 300,000 years of programming makes it hard to resist dopamine-rich activities. You'll always gravitate towards high dopamine activities. You'll always prefer to be on reels over grinding. And stress, like cortisol, is what's released when we're doing a threatening activity. This is why when you're doing studying, you may be stressed sometimes, because your brain associates studying with a life-threatening activity, and as a result, your brain's telling you secretly you may die. Because cavemen, going in the bear's cave is death, but to us, studying isn't death, but our brain thinks it is. So all this means is our literal biology, our DNA, our genetics is telling us, do the easy thing, go the easy way out, go the easy route, do easy things that give us high dopamine, and don't do the hard things which have low dopamine. Now, this is a pretty tough predicament, because we want to study, but now we know we can't. So how do we work around this? Because we have to do work. So how do we do it? I'll tell you how in a second. Alright, I'm back. I'm back. So let's get back into it. So here are some short-term solutions to, where did I put this? PIP. Okay. So here are some short-term solutions to overcome the part of your brain that craves dopamine. So the very first thing, and probably the most easiest to implement right away, is a mindset switch. So we have to understand that doing hard work is going to feel like trudging through the mud, right? Because sometimes, for me especially, I'll think when I'm locked in, doing work is easy. But when I'm locked in, I'm doing work, it's still kind of like, it's still hard. Doing hard questions is still hard. Like, no shit, bro. And the reason that I explain super clearly that we need to understand why hard work feels so bad is because if we assume it's gonna feel good and it's not, we'll then quit halfway through. So the first thing we should know is that doing hard work is going to be hard, and be prepared for that. A boxing coach called Kaz D'Amato once said that the punch that knocks a man out is the one he doesn't see coming. So if you don't see that the work is going to be hard, if it's like a shock, then it may knock you out. But if you see it coming, you'll be able to react better and make a more accurate decision. Like, you may not quit because you know it's going to be hard, instead of you think it's going to be easy and then you get into it and it's tough, right? So the first thing, be mentally ready for the slug. Be ready for it, because it's going to happen. The second one, probably the most important one. So I put the first one is the easiest. Second one is the most important. Step down the ladder. So for some of us, a big mistake that you can do is you're scrolling on reels, you're doing some fun stuff, immediately you jump into work. Well, as I've seen over here, when the drop is too steep, it's impossible to do work, right? Over here, the very bottom point. So what that means for you guys is, if the stuff you're doing before is up here, and then your work is down here, if that gap is too steep, the quality is going to be poor. It's not going to be good. So as a result, you're not going to end up doing good work. But if you're up here, reels, you drop down one to read a book for a little bit, then drop down one more to meditate, then drop down to work. These small incremental drops over about 45 minutes will mean when you start working, the gap isn't too steep. So as a result, you can get working without a problem. It's much easier. So as a result, you get more higher quality work and less distractions. Now, the second short-term solutions are the 10-minute rule and turn off expectations. So the 10-minute rule is related to trudging through the mud. So basically, what you have to understand is, I think everyone can relate. There's been a session where you don't want to do it, it's so hard, but you force yourself to do it, and after about 10 minutes, it feels fine, right? So what this means for you is, if you can't do a 1.5 hour session because it's too daunting, say, okay, forget the 1.5 hours. I'm going to do 10 minutes. I'll do one question. And after you do those 10 minutes, you then reassess. Can I go on for another 80 minutes? And chances are, if you had a good drop, so let's go with a reasonable drop, like a small drop, then chances are at the end of the 10 minutes you'll be fine, you can continue. But if your drop is too big, then after 10 minutes you'll be too cooked, too burnt out, and if you stop, then you'll know why, because you weren't ready for it. So a really good technique I use is the 10-minute rule, where if I feel like I can't do work, I'll just do 10 minutes. And if I can't get past that, then no session, we'll just forget about it. But if I can get past it, I'll just show it to myself that even though I was feeling hesitant, then I actually did end up getting work done. So this is very useful. And the last one is again a mental switch, but it's more of like something for like a high achieving student. So I've got friends who are like super duper smart, and their work ethic is kind of poor, right? So basically what happens is, because they're so smart, they think, dude, I can do 24 hours straight working. Okay, that's a bit of an example, or high example. Or dude, I can do 3 hours working non-stop, but they've been watching reels for 2 hours straight. So they have a high expectation to do 3 hours of work. This is so daunting mentally. If you're about to do work and you're seeing 3 hours of work ahead of you, that's so hard to get into, right? So like if you've been brain rotting in a rut and you're not at your top performance, then don't expect yourself to perform the same way you would if you were at peak level. So for example, an analogy is, in the gym, at your strongest strength, you can bench press 100 kilograms, right? I can. But if you get injured and you're below where you used to be, and you try and bench 100, you're not at the level to even deserve to bench 100. So don't even try, because you may injure yourself, or in this case, you may burn out, or you may not do it, right? So if you're at the peak level, then by all means push yourself. But if you know you've been in a rut and you're in a bad position, then don't expect yourself to do the same work they used to do when you were in your peak level. So then drop your expectations, turn them off, do as much as you can, and build back up to your peak self. So this last one here, this works when you're like in a rut, right? Don't try and do all the work that you could do before. Just do a small amount and work your way up. But the most important thing is to understand that these tips are provided to you, they're not enough. So if you implement every single bit of advice I told you in this video, you'll get about 10% of your overall capacity. The other 90%, you're going to achieve that by doing more long-term changes, like cutting out social media, which is something that I think is very, very helpful to any student, and I would recommend it thoroughly. Get off all social media. You don't need it, right? But again, that's just some like personal things, but more long-term lifestyle things. As I said before in this first slide, the time of day, right? For me, I find working in the morning to be much more effective. So then, as a result, I'm trying to make an effort to wake up early. Like my bed's right here, right? You see it's got stuff on it because I don't know why I showed you that. But the point is, I wake up in the bed quite early, and if I start working earlier, I can have more hours in my most productive state of mind. So these long-term systematic lifestyle changes are going to be the ones that give you the most results. But again, these things are something I'm working on. I'm not fully at my best lifestyle. I'm still doing some things that I shouldn't be doing. But once I figure out enough information, I'll make a new video, and that video will be the kicker, and that's going to make you a 10 out of 10 performer. So stay tuned for that. While I work on myself in this 90%, you guys look back at these tips here. You can even screenshot them, just this one here and this one here. Relearn them, analyze them, figure out how to apply them to your life. So then when I drop this video here, then you're gonna have all the short-term knowledge to then apply, and then you use my short-term tips to supplement your lifestyle, and overall you do so much work, so much more productive. So that's my advice to students who are struggling with sitting down and getting work done. So thanks for listening. Again, my name is Danuga Manige. If you want help from me, my information will be in the description of the video. Check it out. And as always, have a productive day.